Welcome to the Sci-Fi Sci, a podcast about Black science fiction, fantasy, and staying on the same page in this marriage. I'm one of your incredible co-hosts, Amber Wallen.
And I'm Ben.
Are you having fun? Where are we currently? Why don't you tell our fans?
We are inside your parents' closet.
Did you ever think you would be inside of my parents' closet?
Is that a dildo? No, just kidding.
I'm not cutting that out. Hey, everyone at home. Welcome to episode 28 of the Sci-Fi Sci. Today, we're going to be covering Black Lightning Season 2. Like I said, we loved Black Lightning so much on Season 1. You can catch Season 1's episode. It's episode 22 of the Sci-Fi Sci, but we had to come back and talk about Black Lightning Season 2. And there are going to be some spoilers.
Yep, everything will be spoiled for you.
Ben, I think I finally understand what a spoiler is. Because I used to think a spoiler was like, don't spoil this because it just came out and people might see it soon. So give people some time to see it soon.
No, spoiled could be spoiled within anything. You know, if no one's ever seen the Titanic, which is your all-time favorite movie, you shouldn't spoil it and say Jack dies at the end. By the way, spoiler warning for Titanic, if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I truly thought that spoiling something was relevant to the time it came out. So the more you know.
Especially in the science fiction fantasy community, you really need to be giving spoiler warnings. And that's gotten you into trouble a few times because I think you are pretty cavalier about things. Like you'll watch TV over and over and over the same thing. So nothing can really be spoiled for you. But for people who love to have a surprise, spoiler warnings are really important. You're very ignorant about certain nerd culture.
Excuse me?
Which is why we have this podcast. I'm here to train you and teach you. Moving on. So let's go into the CW shows that are like very beefy shows. There's 16 episodes in season 2 of Black Lightning. But I was thinking, why can't we do long shows anymore?
Because our attention span, right? Like 16 episodes is a lot. And I know as we were watching it, I mean, we love the show, but there were definitely some times I was like, okay, now that could have been cut. We typically don't even post a video unless it's like 30 seconds or less because those 1 minutes are just too long, which is insane to think of like a 1 minute video being too long.
I was also looking at when the air date of each episode was, and there is like a month in between each one. I can't wait for network television to release things serially anymore. I need it to be binged. And binging, though, is not about having a short attention span. Actually, if you binge, it means you have a longer attention span. So I was actually thinking of it having to do with patience. Like we are impatient. We want to know everything right away. And so 16 episodes, to get to the end of 16 episodes takes a long time. And there's just so much filler inside these kinds of CW shows. So that's what I was leaning towards. What do you think about that?
When they made the decision to draw it out that long, you sort of, any show, not just Black Lightning Season 2, sometimes you risk us forgetting about what happened so early in the season. Okay, well, you want to build our patience and build our tolerance for things, but I remember at one point, you stopped me at the end of the season, maybe around episode 16. You're like, oh my God, do you remember him from like episode 7? I was like, no. When your audience doesn't remember seeing somebody like 8 or 7 episodes back, like that's kind of not ideal. What was the first show you ever binged that you can really remember?
Lost.
Really? I couldn't
thing.
get into it.
Mm-hmm.
How many episodes was it about? Like 10?
I think you're a little impatient. No, that's network television. So network television, these bigger sort of ABC, CW, NBC, they have really long seasons. That's sort of the thing about those kinds of networks, those public networks. They just produce longer seasons. Maybe they have more money. I don't know. Comparatively, where Game of Thrones, you get 10 episodes or 8. But yeah, Lost. I binge Lost ridiculously. It was one of the most incredible shows I ever watched. What did you binge?
I binged Orange is the New Black. I remember vividly that sort of being one of the earlier shows on Netflix that would drop the whole season. Do you prefer binging or do you prefer like watching and waiting week to week like we do with RuPaul's Drag Race, which I love?
I hate that. I am...
You hate RuPaul's Drag Race?
I know.
I didn't say it, y'all.
I love RuPaul's Drag Race. I hate waiting. So
who's impatient?
It's a mixture of both. It is... I guess I am impatient. Doesn't mean that I have a short attention span. And in fact, I can sit and watch a whole long show or sit and read a whole long book, but I want to get to the end of that book sooner. Let's actually jump into first impressions. My first impression was that every time this show gets a little boring, they throw some wacko weird shit into the mix, whether it is like growing bodies from like leftover possum roadkill to someone's spine getting ripped out of their back to little things I didn't notice before. For example, the fight scenes you were telling me has this like funkadelic bop to it. So that was sort of my first impression, is that I would get bored, but then as soon as I got bored, or if I felt there was a lull, they threw in some wacko weird shit that I just fell in love with. What about you?
My first impression was that the characters were a lot stronger this season, especially as far as villains go. And we'll get into some of the characters that we met this season, but a couple that stick out in my mind is Cutter. She's just like a bad bitch assassin. She was great. We also got to see more of Grace's storyline, who turns out who is Anissa's love interest, but also turns out to be a meta, and Agent Odell, who is obviously a character actor. His characterization was really strong, and I thought they did a great job this season finding some powerful actors, or even Principal Lowry. When things got slow and sort of lull and predictable, they found a way to position those villains to make you just like seethe when you saw them on screen. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, Bill Duke was a huge standout for us. If you haven't seen Bill Duke, you probably have. If you've seen Predator, he's in there, but you kept on describing him as a Muppet.
Yeah.
Which I felt was very disrespectful.
Probably.
Can you explain why you kept on calling Agent Odell a Muppet?
There was something so stiff and emotionless about him in the way that a Muppet would talk. It was just like when a ventriloquist dummy, like just their mouth, their bottom jaw moves up and down. Like he sort of had that energy to him. And his hands, it was as if his hands were sewed to his pants. So everything that he did, I know, but I feel like this is giving people an image of what he is. So his hands he was always in the same outfit, which Muppets don't really change clothes a lot. And his lower jaw only moved, and everything he said was in monotone. So there was something very like inanimate and robotic about his character.
I do want to point out, though, that what you just said are fighting words. The idea that Muppets don't show emotion. A lot of people who love the Muppets will argue that Muppets will probably show more emotion than Agent Odell. So be aware of that.
I will be aware of that. I should say puppet, because Muppet is a specific puppet, but it's like hand me a Kleenex. It's like it's not a Kleenex, but Kleenex is one brand. So that's what I just did. But he is puppet-like in that way.
That makes more sense. That's more acceptable. We don't want to get attacked out here because you're...
Are you tired of getting dragged on TikTok? Because I can take it.
Nope.
I got it.
Last night I saw a superhero, he was black. He said, "This is for the street." Black light.
The way the season 2 is structured is that each set of episodes, anywhere between 3 to 4, is called a book. And so we're going to break down each book together, and I'll give you a summary, and we'll go into it from there. So the first book is called The Book of Consequences. And this book opens with Jennifer is learning how to control her powers that are by far incredibly powerful. And she is getting support from this metahuman therapist called Perenna. And Black Lightning and Thunder are sort of beefing on how to support Freeland. So Thunder gets this alter ego called Blackbird, who can do more of the
vigilante
Robin Hood type of things. And then finally we're introduced to Principal Lowry, aka Master Lowry, who has taken over the school, Garfield High, because Jefferson Pierce was being blamed for the shooting of the school when Khalil Painkiller came in and poison darted everybody. And so Jefferson Pierce is demoted to teacher instead of principal. And then finally, like you said, we're introduced to this guy, Agent Odell. Sort of the true ASA comes in after the ASA rogue agent from the last season was killed. And Dr. Lin is sort of taken over that part of the ASA and helping the green light babies who are in pods. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Perenna, because you actually mentioned Perenna being one of the characters you felt a connection with because of
Living single.
living single, and then also you said that Perenna reminded you a little bit of a family member. Isn't that correct? The griot of the family.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. Okay. So Perenna is played by, I wish I knew her real name. We're going to find her real name in a second. But she plays Maxine on Living Single. And we've always seen her as a very like goofy, she's always been the comic relief in most sitcoms that she's been on. So it was really refreshing to see Maxine Perenna in this griot mentor, spiritual guide role. And I thought a lot about a family member who has since passed away. There was a family member on my mom's side of the family who always used to tell stories, and she used to tell them in this like very mystical, magical way. And all of those stories always had some sort of, it was like a fable, so some sort of moral to those stories. So I felt Perenna really connected in that spiritual guide role. And also Perenna did a really great job of just gaining Jennifer's trust. Like when Jennifer ran away and she could out where Jennifer was, because in this book, Jennifer and Khalil had escaped together. And Perenna still didn't tell her parents like where she was.
Yeah, Perenna is played by Erica Alexander.
Right. And something else that was so nice to see, because it just reaffirms for me like how Black this show is that she would teach Jennifer how to sort of escape, sort of like you're the Star Wars person. What would you call where Yoda would train people or whatever? Would it be like a separate battle place or something? A safe space in their mind? Or you said it was like really derivative.
She is training Jennifer to clear her mind, that meditation.
Yes,
Yeah.
She did that all in a beauty salon, which is really nice because a beauty salon is in so many ways a Black woman's safe space. So I was just curious if there was a name for that when Jedis are being trained or anything.
Yeah, they train at the Jedi Temple, but sort of the idea of getting rid of your anger, when the Emperor says to Luke, "Give in to your anger."
Who says that?
The Emperor to Luke in
Yes.
Return of the Jedi. Anyway.
I thought you were doing a Yoda voice, and I was like, that's not what he sounds like.
No, but there's this whole idea where Jennifer is being told to control her anger, because eventually we learn that in the later books that something very traumatic has happened to Jennifer. And so there's this duality happening between controlling your emotions and giving in to your emotions, and that is very Star Wars.
Gotcha. Well, Perenna is teaching Jennifer how to control those emotions and power them up to do well. And she's doing that in a Black beauty salon.
Yeah, and that Black beauty salon is sort of this metaphysical realm that she's able to take people. She can sort of bring them into any sort of imaginary positioning. So think of it in terms of, I have the ability to imagine that you, Amber, are in a freezing cold, blistery desert. Tundra is also a desert. A lot of people think deserts just are hot, but actually deserts can be cold, besides the fact. And so she can make that happen. So she brings Jennifer into the beauty salon as a safe place in which she can then train Jennifer to control her incredible powers.
If you had incredible powers that you were trying to learn how to control and stuff and wanted to do that in a really cool, authentic, safe space for you, where would that be?
Like the safest space in all of the world. Probably a bookstore. You know that. Yeah.
Which one? Just be really specific.
Probably the one where we did 57th Street Books in Hyde Park, where we did our photo shoot for our marriage thingy.
Engagement photos.
Oh,
they're called engagement photos.
Okay, I forgot the name of it. But anyway, this bookstore is so cool because you walk down into it, and they do lots of they did lots of book readings, and it just is cozy, because you're almost underground in this bookstore, and the roof is very, very short, so you could reach up your hand if you're tall and touch the roof, if you're 6 foot. And the books just smell so comforting. It's all the potential of knowledge that you can then consume that's better than any meal you could ever get at any Michelin star restaurant. I know.
Yeah,
what
let's
I know
talk
what
fighting
your
words.
I know what your place would be. It would be a Michelin star restaurant.
No, because I would want to save that for actual meals. You know what I would do? So years ago, we went on spring break. Me and some teachers at my school went on spring break in St. Croix. And at one point we hiked to this, and I hate hiking, but they told me like there's this really nice private beach at the end of this hike. So we did maybe like a 1 to 2 mile hike to this beach. And we sang Disney songs the whole way to the beach just to make the hike go a little bit faster. And we found this private beach that was so freaking incredible. We even like skinny dipped into the ocean together, and it just felt like nobody in the world could touch us. I would do that. I would go back to that private beach in St. Croix to train to be a bad bitch.
That's really good for me to know, because the 2 times we've gone hiking, it's ended with you angrily sobbing and hating me, literally.
Well, okay,
Angrily
Ben.
sobbing. So next time when we go hiking, we're going to sing Disney songs, and that's what I should try.
Well, let's get into, since you wanted to take it there before we get into the second book. Hiking with you is hard because hiking for you is your own experience, and I'm just there. So you'll go several feet in front of me. You'll climb up things that I can't really get to accessibly because you're in your own world about it. So, and you have you like to be off the grid. So when we see giant snakes and wild monkeys, you give 0 fucks, and I'm afraid. So don't try to just tell people I hate hiking because I'm like a crybaby and don't like to try hard. I did cry, but we've done some knee to chest hikes that I just was not mentally ready for, that you were just running way ahead of me. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm hiking on my own, which is never the goal. Whereas this group of people, we were like, nobody's left behind. We're all going to stick together. We'll slow down for each other. Let's sing songs. So they coddled me.
Did you ever lose me in your sight when we went hiking?
Of course I've lost you in my sight several times.
Oh, that's not acceptable.
Yes,
I apologize.
From the dunes to...
That happened at the dunes?
We've done hiking in Kentucky. We've done hiking in Thailand. And you would just disappear into some bushes. Like if I stop to tie my shoe and look up, you're gone.
Oh, that's right. We've actually gone 3 times. And the one in
We've
Kentucky...
hiked multiple times.
The one in Kentucky, you didn't cry or get upset.
No.
Okay. I do want to talk about
Shady.
Master Lowry, because there's this white dude who comes in to become the principal, and he puts metal detectors in, and he is like, 0 tolerance types policies. And that's sort of, I'm glad they addressed that, this idea of a white person taking over a school. It's because I have worked for schools where the leadership or board members are all white, and the people making the biggest decisions aren't actual members from the community. And I'm really glad they touched on that. And the title of the chapter is called Master Lowry instead of Principal Lowry. And I thought that they were just taking it there. I thought that was a good point. I don't know, you've worked for organizations that pretend to be woke, or they're servicing people of color. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
I think you'd be hard pressed to find a system that didn't operate in that way, to be honest. Like I've worked at schools with black principals, but all of those rules were still coming from white normative culture and white board members. Like all of the schools were named after white politicians in the city, and their rules came from them. Or like the students, so I know the school that I worked at specifically, the owner of that school is an entrepreneur of a clothing company, so all of the kids' uniforms had to be bought via that clothing company, and all of the rules and regulations were just very like, this isn't professional, that isn't professional, do this to your hair, if socks have logos on them, they're unprofessional. Or where it's just like, I've seen white dudes wearing paisley socks. Like these rules are not, somebody made these rules up and we're just enforcing them. And I have enforced those rules when they shouldn't have been enforced. So it's that it was triggering for me in a different way, because it's like, oh, I've been the enforcer of these rules, And I didn't even believe them and was still enforcing them and trying to abide by them myself as well, because it's like you can't tell a kid, hey, it's unprofessional to chew gum, and you're chewing gum as well. So it's interesting how it sort of gets into your psyche in that way.
You know, one of the sides that, you know, will end with a bunch of other sides, but for this particular situation, a big sigh I had was the fact that Jefferson Pierce decides to stay on as a teacher after being a principal. I was like, man, you're taking a huge like salary cut. Like, you have a whole house to pay with. I was sort of confused by that. I can't imagine anybody losing, principals at least, losing their job and like going back to being a teacher.
I know, but I think it totally plays into Jefferson's character because he's always like taking the high road and he loves the kids so much. So he still wanted to stay, like, and maybe like a part of his ego is like, well, I need to be here for these kids to watch after them. I'll take any position I need to because I love these kids a lot. So I think that's why he took it. Obviously, he didn't want to be a teacher, but he's like, I still want to make sure my daughter is going to a school that cares about her.
Yeah, to that
So most of it was nosy.
Yeah, to that point, I started to realize how sort of shitty Jefferson Pierce was after.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's not the greatest dude. Like, for example, he has this rule of not killing, but he'll break their arms, and I started to really see him as a more violent type of person, you know? Even his mentor Gamby, where the last episode of the last season, he shoots and kills somebody. And in this season, we see him bringing up the body count. And to that point, let's move up to the next book, the Book of Blood. In this book, it starts with Gamby being killed. He's sort of shot and his van explodes. And
So to recap, the book 1 was the Book of Consequences. Now this is the Book of Blood.
Yes, this is moving into the Book of Blood, where Gamby is killed, and Dr. Lynn, who's working for the ASA, is brought in some help of Dr. Jace, who was this awful, like, mad scientist type of character, and she ends up using her knowledge to awaken some of the green light babies, or green light children. They're not green light babies, but they're green light children. And when she awakens them, she ends up killing 14 of these children. And it's a really intense scene where you have Dr. Lynn on one side and Dr. Jace on this other side, who are trying to work together to study these children and bring them back. But they do it in very different means.
That's why I sort of disagree with you when you say, like, Jefferson, we saw him become an asshole this season. I think in a lot of ways we saw all of the characters level up their anger and develop differently, because Lynn Stewart, I mean, a doctor is a powerful role, obviously, but she sort of went from, like, the tail end of season 1, we saw her, like, pick up a gun shyly and do some damage. But in this season, she's punching bitches. She's got her gun cocked. She's going to bed every night with a cocktail because it's hard out here for a pimp. Like, everybody sort of had a moment this season where they went from, like, anger to rage, and we definitely saw that transformation with Dr. Lynn Stewart, because she takes her work so seriously. And when she had to work with this white lady, Dr. Jace, who is essentially the Master Lowry of the ASA tank, like, not in a leadership way, but just trying to do things because, like, this is the way things need to be done. They're very, like, government organized. And so we just saw, like, all of the parallels we saw with Jefferson and Mr. Lowry, we saw with Lynn and Dr. Jace. Yeah,
Lynn beats up Dr. Jace like a couple of times. He gets into, like, punches. She gets those licks in. I want to talk into Anissa's character arc, because what she's done, she has sort of gone full vigilante, stolen a bunch of drug money and given it to the pastor of the church, Reverend Holt, to sort of build up this health clinic. And she starts working for the health clinic as well. But in the midst of doing that, she discovers, sort of on the outskirts of Freeland, this group of, like, white supremacists led by this woman Looker, who is absolutely terrifying. And Anissa has to go take her down with Black Lightning. But that whole scene was very intense. Like, what were your thoughts about Looker?
It was very intense. So I'll say this. Season 2 tried to introduce another, like, subplot, I guess you would call it, of, as Ben said, this white supremacist group versus also this all-black group. It felt very Knots and Crosses. If you haven't listened to those episodes, go back and listen. But So these two groups were called the Purdy and the Sanjay. The Sanjay are the black people, and the Purdy are the white people.
No, the Sanjay are the group of white people who are being controlled by Looker. They have no autonomy on their own. And they used to be, think of like the heroin epidemic or the crack epidemic in sort of poorer white neighborhoods. I think that's what they were going for. And so they found liberation through Looker, who has this thing called the element, which is thinking of like a silver goo that she uses to control people.
Yeah, it like goes in through your pores and controls you. But I appreciated those parts of the season, but it felt so disconnected. I'm sure it's, we're only in season 2 and there are 4 seasons. So, but it just felt so disconnected from everything else that was going on that those parts were a little bit hard to keep up with, because it's like we're already dealing with so many characters in Freeland, and then South Freeland is its own even more heightened dystopia. So I don't know, that when we're talking about this season could have been 10 episodes instead of 16, that's a storyline for me that could have waited to next season.
Fair enough. In this chapter, in this book, the Book of Blood, we're also learning that Jennifer is starting to be homeschooled, and she does not like it. So
a fate worse than death.
Oh, she is not having it. And she's feeling super trapped and controlled. So she reaches out to Painkiller, and her and Painkiller start to develop a relationship together. And Painkiller is feeling really trapped by Tobias Whale, because Tobias Whale, who at this time has been set free, he's been exonerated, and so he's now back in Freeland, and he's starting to buy up all this property. He can't get Reverend Holt's clinic, so he hires Painkiller to go kill Reverend Holt. Painkiller's like, nah, man. So Painkiller and Jennifer decide to run away at the end of this book. I don't know. Did you believe that, like, Jennifer would run away? Is homeschooling that bad? Like,
yes.
Like, it doesn't... Jennifer, this is where first of all, Jennifer is an amazing character, but she is sort of this spoiled, rich brat.
Yes.
And I think we have to, like, understand that. And the fact that she's like, I'm homeschooled. Like, how can she not understand that her powers can actually kill a bunch of people? Like, I don't know. It didn't make sense.
Ben. Sweet, sweet Ben. So 1, rich people want to run away all the time, right? 2, I think in the age of Gen Z, where everything is on your phone, and the FOMO of seeing everyone from your school hanging out, having parties, being regular air quote teenagers, and you were stuck and trapped at home. I think homeschooling is hard, but especially if you've been not homeschooled and then forced into being homeschooled, a kind to all of the kids right now. Like, the pandemic was really hard for kids, especially if you saw especially for teenagers who saw themselves going to prom, saw themselves daily interacting with their friends, and now you got your phone in your hand and you're watching, like, crap. Like, I don't have the same life that I have anymore, and that took a mental toll on lots of kids, and I'm sure lots of kids ran off with their friends. Lots of kids still had house parties this year. So it felt very, very authentic to me that Jennifer would run off with Khalil.
Did you ever run away as a kid? You ever pack your bags and be like, peace out, yo?
I have tried to go, like, away and in an angry disappearance, but I was never, which I ran to my grandma's house, but I was never there for more than 24 hours.
That's pretty far, though. How old were you?
Maybe like 16, 17.
Oh, did you drive? Or
yeah,
did you...
I drove over there. Yeah. I'm not a real runaway unless I...
Yeah, you're not a real runaway until you run away. Running, you can't... They don't call it a drive away. They call it runaway.
Jennifer got in Khalil's car and ran off. Like, that's what happened. She didn't walk to his house.
Well,
he picked her up, no?
To his train. He lives in, like, this abandoned train car, which is super sad.
He's still made into a very, like, homey spot. Did you ever run away?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
For,
and
like,
I
days?
was homeschooled, so I sort of just...
Right. So how's it that impossible when you...
Well, my family wasn't, like, super wealthy, and I didn't have, like, superpowers. So I think there's no excuse for Jennifer. She should have known better.
I think that when I think about people that run away, I think about rich kids in the suburbs. If I'm being honest, like, I know very few lower income people that ran away. They're like, ran away where? Everybody in the neighborhood knows me. Like, everybody in this section. I don't know. Maybe I'm tripping.
Next book, The Book of Rebellion. This is where Tobias really comes into play. So he's pissed off that Khalil has run away, and he's hired his old bae, the fabulous Cutter, this poison knife-wielding assassin with low telekinesis capability, to find Khalil. And Cutter was just phenomenal. I mean, I think you were just in love with Cutter.
Yeah, if I could play any character on the show, it would be Cutter, for sure.
She has this level of badassery, but also later in the season we discover that is not a sociopath like Tobias Whale. And as this is going on, like, Tobias Whale is sort of knee deep in reading like war books, and all he cares about is his own sort of philosophy, his self. And it's actually just really disturbing how he can invite this old bae back and just completely use her and mistreat her and tell her take out the trash, and it's awful.
Yes. Can I this is random and funny, but you know how Old Bay is like a crab boil seasoning? So every time you say Old Bay, I'm like, why is he talking about seasoning? I'm like, oh, I see. Like an ex-bay.
Well, Cutter is the seasoning for Tobias, because
right.
Tobias is sort of this
and
one
he is
note.
A whale. He is seafood.
He is seafood.
But let me say this about her. It's so interesting. So 2 things. It's sad because even a woman who is a silent assassin can fall for fuckboy shit. Like that really felt sad and a little disjointed. I was like, damn, now she falling for his games. But it's like, that makes sense. 2, can we talk really briefly, like 30 seconds or less, about how Tobias has so many freaking hobbies? He's actually he's a pretty well-rounded villain. Like, he likes to read, he enjoys playing pool, he really enjoys jazz, he's into some fine whiskeys, he has a nice fish collection. Like, he's kind of a socialite a little bit.
Yeah, I think for people who don't like other people or only see people as a means to an end, the thing that you find value then can't be people, because you don't see people as any value. So you look on to sort of different hobbies. You look at hobbies as the things that give you value, which I thought was super. It checks out for him.
But what doesn't check out then is his relationship that was so close with his sister. Like, he's treasured his sister. It's like one of the few people that we see him show compassion to, but we can't say completely that he's a sociopath when he has his sort of own relationship with her.
Yeah, I guess it's not, because he is really pissed because at the beginning of the season, Cyanide gets killed off like almost immediately. And he loves Cyanide, even though she might have like 3 speaking lines for all of season 1. He loved her. And so he blames Khalil for that as well. And so he's constantly moping about how Cyanide has been killed and how Black Lightning has taken everything. So that is interesting, how he can treat Cutter terribly, but then also actually have a very close connection with his sister Tori, who he has this Queen Victoria painting of her that he talks throughout the season, and we start to see that in this book. So he's hired Cutter. He's also hired this brilliant programmer, Todd, who's this blurred, who's this brilliant programmer who's been passed over for promotions and has created programs that have been, stolen from him. And so Todd sort of has a vendetta. So he hires Cutter, he hires Todd, and he essentially captures Khalil by the end of this episode, and Jennifer returns by the end of these chapters, and Jennifer returns to her family. And once he captures Khalil, to punish him, he rips out Khalil's spine.
Ooh.
That has been giving him this powers. That was the moment in this season where I just sat up. I'm like, can they do that on sort of the CW? I was like, that's some Game of Thrones shit right there.
That's... I couldn't have said it better. Yeah. The sit up in your seat moment. I think anybody who watched that, we all sat up because we all felt our spinal cords being ripped. Like lumbar 7 through cervix, thoracic, all the parts of the spine. We were like, oh my gosh, this is the most gory part I've ever seen. And you just felt like the actor that played Khalil is so good because you felt the anguish and the sweat and the spit of his spine being just pulled from his exoskeleton. Oh,
it was a lot.
Yeah, that was a nice close to the Book of Rebellion.
So going on to the Book of Secrets, Khalil surprisingly doesn't survive, his spine being ripped out, and he dies. And Jen actually begins to grieve, like, pretty terribly. Like, she is just... Because you get the sense that Jennifer and Khalil were madly in love with each other. And actually, believed their relationship, because throughout it, you're like, oh, Ben, you've never been in love in high school.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I haven't been. But you were telling me, like, things that you'd say to your high school boyfriend. I was like,
we
really?
were so in love. Like, every other day, we were like, we should just ride out and get out of here and just run away and be together because the world's against us. Like, that's how you feel in high school.
I'm sorry,
And
I'm
it
laughing.
would be for no real reason. It's just like, my dad's like, come home on time. I don't have to listen to him. We could be out of here tomorrow. Like, everything is like that. So, yeah, I felt that high school love. I don't think I've ever told you this, but when I was in 6th grade, I went to a summer camp, right? And there was this, like, camp at UGA, and I always loved going there because they had, like, some cute boys from Greene County at this camp. And so... these are, you have like a little summer camp love. So I fell in love with this guy. His name was Cameron. And everything he did, he was like really well spoken, and he had all this swag, and he just had really cool braces. And then the next summer I saw him, so it was 6th grade, then 7th grade I saw him, his braces were off. He's looking like a Mac Daddy, beautiful guy. There's this like poem that he recited called like 60 seconds. It's like, I only have a minute, only 60 seconds in it. I can't remember the whole thing, but he would recite this poem. I think we had like a talent show or something at the end of the camp, and he recited that poem in 7th grade. So halfway through, so it's not the 8th grade year yet, right? Halfway through the 7th grade year, they sent an email to all of the camp kids to say that Cam had died in a car accident. And that was my first time being like, because I was like, we liked each other. And then I saw him in 7th grade. And it's like, I couldn't wait for the summer to come, because at Camp Aspire, I was going to see Cam. And he passed away in this tragic car accident. And I grieved for like 2 or 3 weeks. And mind you, this was a guy I barely knew. I only knew him 1 to 2 weeks out of every summer. But I just got so excited every year thinking about camp coming around. And my mom was like, she took it so seriously, because at that age I really had never like lost someone. But if you think about it, we weren't that close. We only saw each other for a few hours a year, and it felt so traumatic, So I totally related to Jennifer going through what she did with Khalil, because they probably only dated like 8 months, but you're in love, and this person's like the reason that you're excited to go to camp and go to school. And so I just remembered that, and it's hard when you lose a love interest at a young age.
Well, on that note, people who die in this series don't stay dead for long. So surprise, surprise, Gamby.
Great segue, Big. Great segue.
Gamby is actually not dead.
Yep.
He was able to escape. And the people who tried to kill him is this whole other group called the Markovians. So now we have a new set of villains. So we had the 100, Tobias Whale, and we got our new group, the Markovians.
Did you believe Gamby was dead?
I was hoping so, because he was getting on my nerves.
Why?
Well, because Gamby is always like, and then you got to do this thing. No, Jefferson, no.
So he's breathy? He's an intense actor?
I need some people to die. I think post Game of Thrones, I'm used to high turnover rate. Also working in Chicago public schools, I'm used to high turnover rate.
Wow.
So I need people to move along,
Yeah. There have to be stakes. I hear that. Can you explain to people who Gamby is, if they haven't listened to our last episode 22, which you totally should?
Gamby used to be this rogue ASA agent and was part of introducing this vaccination that gave metahuman capabilities to the children of Freeland. He feels bad for it. He decides to raise Black Lightning, aka Jefferson Pierce. So he's sort of the uncle / grandfather of the Pierce family. And he sort of stands as the backup and also the nerd who helps out all the family get their suits ready. And so
The Alfred.
He's the Alfred. He's the Alfred for sure. But he also is a little bit more involved in the missions, where Alfred sort of stays at the mansion. Gamby will go out and, snipe people and beat them up.
He has no like, I will not kill, I will take the higher road code.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's a real G.
Yeah, Gamby.
Yeah, real G for Gamby.
Gamby the gangster.
So we're introduced like the Markovians, where we're not really given much about them, but apparently they had sort of forced Dr. Jace to work for them. Dr. Jace was able to escape. Interesting things to know in this is that once Todd, the nerd, the blurred, runs out of his use, Tobias just kills him. Ugh. And I was really disappointed in that. I really liked Todd. He is sort of, I feel like he had a lot of potential.
Yeah,
his potential was gone.
He's like a youth, so we had just so much hope in him. And we don't really get to see like a young black scientist who just is excited by the challenge of figuring out how to tap into a secret government organization. Like black hackers, I want to see more of that. I wish Todd had a spinoff. And these kids are smart as fuck.
Yeah. Well, Tobias and Cutter, they've been able to go and capture these metahumans called the Masters of Disaster, which was this failed ASA program. And they're like really goofy, sort of thug villains type of thing who can, shoot fire and ice and very standard hero type of things. But this is where we really start to see Tobias Whale and Cutter start to like make out and get comfy with each other and get all cutesy and stuff.
Funny. It's funny because they made out and everybody was like, what? It was very comical because that is how we all react when we see people just like making out in the street. How do you feel about PDA, Ben? Do you like PDA and your villains? Were they giving you the Joker, Harley Quinn vibes?
Yeah, that's sort of, I think, what they were going for. And this is DC, so it makes sense that they would build that. Except Harley Quinn is way more reliant on the Joker than Cutter is on Tobias. And at one point in the next book, the Book of the Apocalypse, this is where Cutter decides to leave Tobias and they get into this huge fight. It's actually really intense because Cutter sort of talks back at Tobias and Tobias just grabs her neck and starts choking her. I felt like they equalized it when she does this really amazing backflip kick and knocks him out and she's about to slit his throat. And he's like, what, are you going to cut me? And I was like, motherfucker, you just choked her. Right. Yes, I hope she cuts you.
And also, in a couple books back, we saw Anissa sought revenge on a gang member who had assaulted his girlfriend. Anissa treated her at the medical clinic, and then she didn't rat her boyfriend out or whatever, but Anissa, as Blackbird, that Robin Hood vigilante, showed up on his step and started beating him up and was like, I heard you like to beat up women, which was so, I was like, Anissa, now he's going to know that, you were sent by her, or he's going to think, you're going to get this girl killed for thinking that she snitched on him, whereas she could have just like beat them up and kept going. You remember that?
And I totally forgot that scene because it's amazing. Right after that, when she leaves, they do this whole old boy fight scene, which was killer. So if you haven't seen Old Boy, go ahead and see it. One of the best.
Not the
fight
American
scenes.
remake, the regular Old Boy, the Korean film. So good. I've seen it a few times now, and it was a nice nod to that kung fu scene.
Oh, it's so good. But yeah, you're right. I didn't realize that. All right, so now we get into the last and final book where one of my all-time favorite characters from season 1, who I thought was dead, Lala, comes back. He's raised from the dead by Lazarus Prime, who was the love interest of Lady Eve. And Lala comes back to sort of wreak havoc and get his revenge on Tobias. And what happens in this last sort of 2 episodes is that Tobias wants to take over Freeland, so he sends the 100 and the Pod Kids and the Masters of Disaster to sort of just destroy everything in Freeland. But Black Lightning and Thunder come to the rescue and they stop the Masters of Disaster. Jennifer comes in. She's about to enact her revenge on Tobias. And this is the whole, like, give in to your anger or, use the Force, Luke. Like, which one do you use? And thank God, Jennifer makes the right decision and just beats the shit out of Tobias instead of killing him. Originally, she wanted to kill him, but she beats him up. Tobias is put into the pit. And lo and behold, Tobias is away and starts with season 3 going to be this big war showdown between the Markovians and the Black Lightning family, which, by the way, when the superhero names of everybody now is Black Lightning, is Jefferson Pierce, Anissa is Thunder, and then Jennifer calls herself Lightning. I don't know if you caught that when she breaks in. She's like, I'm Lightning. So we have Black Lightning and Lightning. I wish they just thought of a different
Me
name for her.
too, because it just implies that she's not White Lightning, but I don't know. It's strange.
Something that also annoyed me, we find out that Khalil Payne is not dead because people don't die on network television. It turns out
Yes,
he's being held by Agent Odell in one of the pods. And that's where this season ends.
So that's a recap of all 5 books, but something that kind of doesn't make sense to me, I wouldn't call it a sigh, but I just like to hear your opinion about it. So Lazarus Prime, he's sort of a wizard, and he gets like roadkill animal parts and can recraft them into human beings and essentially bring people back to life. That's what Lazarus happened to him. So why wouldn't he, if Lady Eve was the love of his life, why wouldn't he bring her back to life?
Oh, I don't. There's probably a comic book reason for that. That's a great question.
Right. I know she was like really like burnt to a crisp, so maybe he has to still have some part of her body and she's locked away at the morgue. But if your whole vibe is reawakening people, maybe he didn't want her to be a slave, because there is an element of people who are brought back to life have some sort of safety word that makes them enslaved to whoever says that word. So maybe he didn't want that to happen to her.
Maybe.
Or does Lazarus Prime work for Tobias? Because he definitely sent Lala in there to get Tobias, but he was still under some sort of curse.
Yeah, I think Tobias was... Well, Tobias says, like, you were brought back by Lazarus Prime, but I put something inside you before your physical body so I can control you. There are a lot of like mad scientist type themes here, and I get so frustrated with mad scientist themes because it gives the implication that scientists are evil people, and that just isn't true. The scientists I know, all they fucking care about is science, right? They're the ones who are just going to be hanging out in a basement, not really doing anything, not going out and wreaking havoc. They just want to study science.
Yeah. People are afraid of science, though.
I know, and I think when you create TV shows and you put mad scientists in there, we're going to experiment on children, or we're going to, give people vaccinations that are poisonous, right? It taps into a social anxiety of vaccination. It taps into this idea that scientists are only looking out for themselves and only care about research, and that simply is not true. And we get a lot of mad scientist type vibes. I mean, Dr. Helga Jace, for all I like about her, is pretty awful, but there are some things that you're like, yeah, Dr. Helga Chase is great.
I mean, I agree with you about how those portrayals seep and find their ways into people's psyche, but I don't know. There's something I really love about when a character is bad and they turn that throttle all the way up. It's just like, oh yeah, she is insidious. Like I sort of hate when I'm on the fence about certain characters. Maybe that's because they're evolving and developing, which is great. But I love either hating or completely standing a character. And so we hated Dr. Jace, but she delivered some of the meanest, craziest lines on the show. So I was a fan of that. It's the same thing with Tobias Whale. I hate Tobias Whale, which is why he's so good, because he has all these like hobbies and he's a sociopath and he's super powerful, and he just plays that character really well.
Also, Agent Odell sort of taps into this mad scientist type of thing where
For sure.
He's like, oh, the pod kids are only good for becoming weapons. You don't
like a
treat
dog.
like a dog. A dog, you don't let a dog sleep in the bed with you. You don't dress up the dog because then the dog thinks it's equal to you. No, a dog is a useful tool, and so are these children who were given this vaccination. And
That's so hard to hear.
I mean, that actually felt more believable to me because he's part of the ASA, which is this government organization, think FBI, whose main goal is to create weapons and get intel, where Dr. Jace and Lazarus Prime are scientists. And that just annoyed me that their whole science is for selfish reasons. And I'm sure obviously there are scientists out there, but the fact that there's a mad scientist theme sort of irks me. So let's go ahead, jump into the size. God is a big part of this season. Jefferson Pierce believes in God. He says that, these are God-given gifts to him, and that just
And
made...
burdens, he said, too.
And burdens. And then also Reverend Holt is a big part in this.
Well, he's the reverend. You can't really use him as the...
Yeah, but here's the thing. When religious organizations create health clinics, which is a big plot point of this, what that does is that it can actually allow these health clinics to not always provide services to groups of people that don't fit into their religious understandings. For example, whether it's be like Catholic hospitals, not denying abortions, which there's sort of, the laws are sort of like fuzzy on that because there's a separation of church and state. But if you're the only health clinic in the area and the only health clinic is a religious affiliation, you might not be carrying hormones for trans people. We might not be carrying all the materials to provide a safe abortion. And therefore, you're not saying, I'm not going to give you these hormones, or I'm not going to give you this abortion, but you're saying we don't have the funds or we don't have the resources to provide that service. And that's what you get when health clinics are run by religious organizations. And it sort of brought up some of that like frustration. I mean, obviously it's network television and God is a buzzword for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree, especially with these like Black smaller communities and neighborhoods. I'm going to go back to your side for me of, this is a pet peeve of mine. When people die, they need to stay dead. Like, I hate when people are constantly brought back to life. Like, I don't enjoy killing, obviously, but if you're going to kill someone, if you're going to tell me you did a thing, do the thing. That's my big, like, Black Lightning is already 101 characters in this series with 102 episodes. So if you kill a character, keep them dead. That's all I ask.
The other thing I want to talk about is sort of the end. Jefferson Pierce tries to sit down everybody and be like, here are our rules. We don't tell anybody, which they immediately break. Always have backup because,
that's a good rule.
They've been doing things. That's fine. And then don't kill anybody. And again, like...
Yeah, you said it's last time.
I know. It's...
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a specific... Now he's sitting down. They're having their family dinner. This is a specific type of thing. And it just annoyed me that you're going to make this rule, don't kill anybody, but not really address the fact that you are breaking bones and you torture people. He straight up tortures people in here. I'm like...
This is the CW. You can't preach kill people, though. You can fuck their shit up, but you can't kill them. But
when Gamby goes to with Jennifer to sort of bring the power back on Freeland, he just snipes people in the face with his silencer.
Well, let me ask you this, because I just like playing devil's advocate. If we were to have a kid and their favorite show was Black Lightning and they loved Black Lightning, would you want Black Lightning to be a killer then? Because if they aspire to be Black Lightning.
I think this show doesn't really know what it wants to be, in the sense that, is it a kid show or is it a show for a developing young adult who's starting to learn that there is not this black and white?
Got it.
And that in this show, it sort of makes it very black and white, that black is the good, so Black Lightning is good, and the white is the bad, which is, Tobias Wells. So just... that flip-flop there. They're doing a lot of cool stuff with the show. I'm not going to deny that. But I don't think they sort of analyze Black Lightning's flaws as well as they could. I mean, in some ways they really do. Like when when Jennifer leaves at one time, you were just struck by Dr. Lynn, who's supposed to be this grounding scientist. Like, what did she do when Jennifer leaves?
She just tore her room up from wall to wall. Yeah, I mean, which is great. Like, Dr. Lynn is a really strong character, but I'm just saying, back to my question, would you want our kid to watch if our kid were watching this show, would you want him to have a no-kill rule, or would you want our kid to know, sometimes superheroes kill motherfuckers, and that's fine, because it depends on the circumstance?
That's a great question, Amber. I don't know the age of our child, this hypothetical child.
Yeah.
Are they old enough to run away from home because we're homeschooling them?
Oh.
That was a joke.
Well, that's a sigh. That's a relationship side, because I can't, especially after this year of learning from home, homeschooling has never felt this unattractive.
All right, final sigh.
Final one, baby.
Grace Choi is amazing. I think the relationship she has with Anissa is absolutely beautiful. And Grace Choi is a metahuman. She is a shapeshifter. I loved that. But they just did not give her enough time. Like, why do we go into this whole looker plot line? Like, I would have much rather Grace Choi.
Same.
Seeing the plot line of Grace Choi, because they sort of delve a little bit into her background, and that she like grew up through an adoption agency, and she's keeping this secret hidden, but she also needs to like consume rotting flesh, I guess, to be a shapeshifter. I'm looking forward to see her more in season 3, but she was wasted in season 2.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at least glad, if you haven't seen it, yeah, Grace Choi is Anissa's love interest. She's an Asian girl. She clearly has powers as well. She's a shapeshifter. Anissa actually had another girlfriend at the beginning of season 2 that she only had for like an episode or 2. Ben was like, well, yeah, that girl is an upload, so she probably had to do another show, so they probably had to write her out of the show. But thankfully, Grace sort of became Anissa's like rebound again, and they reconnected so Grace could be there for a couple of episodes, and now she has like an even stronger part. So I'm just glad at least they brought her back. But yeah, you know, she deserved better and more as a character. And Ben, with that being said, why don't you warp up the show?
In conclusion, go back, watch season 2 of Black Lightning. It asks some real questions about death, messy love, and vigilante justice. We're really looking forward to watch season 3 and finish off with season 4.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Sci-Fi Sci. Next week for episode 29, we will be reading a book, y'all. We're reading Walter Mosley's Futureland, and I already started it, and trust me, you do not want to miss out on this book. So please be sure to pick up your copy of Futureland or listen to it on Audible, and we will see y'all next week for the show. Bye, y'all.
Commerce solutions from JP Morgan Payments do more than you think. On one hand, customers get a flexible shopping experience, paying how they want with the security they expect. On the other, your business gets an end-to-end platform to manage and send payments while unlocking better customer insights. When you put those together, you get commerce solutions from JP Morgan Payments. So much more than a payments platform. It's revolutionizing the way you do business. Products and services of JP Morgan Chase & Co. and its affiliates are subject to applicable terms. JP Morgan Chase Bank, N.A. member FDIC.
A freshly cracked egg, melty cheese, and hickory smoked bacon or grilled sausage inside a warm cheddar biscuit. Sounds perfect, right? What if we told you can get 2 for just $6? Yep, even perfecter. The Cheddar Biscuit, only at Jack in the Box. Price and participation may vary.